story, but and basically from my side, I don't know if you've been talking to me or not, but I work together with the recruitment and admissions teams here at IE University. My name is Matthias. I work with some of my colleagues that you probably have been in touch with, which is Andres Lantancio, with Jessica Alford, and of course with Martin Hill. We all work together for the same team, and of course for all of the executive MBAs, global online MBA, global executive MBA as well. So many of you guys are already on the process or already finishing. Some of you are already enrolled for the upcoming intake. And today the idea is to give you kind of an example of what we looking like a class on your typical MBA. And today we have an amazing professor here. We have Sandra. She actually is right now in the US. She's enjoying a nice summer over there. Apparently the weather is very good, but she's going to tell a little bit more of that. And Sandra basically, she teaches us many executive MBA programs here at IE. And of course, she focuses a lot on leadership, culture. But of course, I want to let you, Sandra, introduce yourself to give a little more description. And again, thank you for helping us in this session, and the rest. Hopefully you enjoy this class. Thank you very much, Sandra.
Thank you, Matthias, and welcome to everybody. Please know that I respect you're keeping your cameras closed, but if you do decide you want to open them, of course, you're more than welcome. And I've been at IE for many years. I was a student at IE myself and did my MBA degree at IE and have been teaching at the university since that time. So I'll just share with you a couple of quick thoughts that in the study of who we are as managers and leaders, we have to be able to have an understanding of what is in the future so that we can prepare ourselves for it, and also all the people we're working with and also for. So today's session is pretty exciting. It's about the future of work. There have been many studies that have been coming out on this topic. And I also am sharing with you some brand new research today that was shared with me a week ago from two professors in London. They were presenting it in a Harvard forum at Harvard Business School. And so I'm going to share that with you as well. So if everyone's excited to move forward, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to go through some information. Feel free to ask questions and interrupt me anytime. And go ahead and write on the chat also as you like. Matthias, maybe you'll have a look at the chat, so if people have questions or comments along the way, we can integrate them into our session today.
Sure, no problem. I will read the chat in case there's any questions and let you know.
Perfect. So I'm sharing now my PowerPoint, and I hope that it is visible to all. You should be able to see it as a full screen. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, terrific. Well, let's just begin with the beginning, or as it says in an old song in the United States, let's begin with the beguine, which is just a made-up word. Today, we're going to talk about the new future of work and how it intersects for us with the great global challenges that we're facing. And so as each of us looks through what we're discussing today over the next several minutes, I'm going to ask you to be connecting everything that we discuss with the great challenges that are facing us that require excellent management and leadership at all levels. So the quick objectives here is to, number one, have an understanding of what is work and what is the new future of work, to understand the value given to innovation and to use an expansive notion of innovation. So that it's not that we're just looking to innovate a product to sell, but we want to innovate our work environment, our workspaces, the work relationships that we have, the way in which that we intersect with our work, perhaps even the way in which our work intersects with the world at large. And then with regard to any sort of notion that we may have of leadership, one of the key factors is to understand how we can actually prepare people for the future of our companies and for the future of the world. And in order to be able to prepare oneself and other people, it's important to have an idea of what's going on. So if it's all right with everybody here, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to begin with looking at the future of work. Is everybody good with that? And I want to thank those of you who have been able to open your camera. Again, I perfectly well understand for those who don't. But I will now just take a quick look here at three primary areas for us to be considering as we open our minds to this topic. The first is, what is the relationship between the future of work and innovation? And I'm just going to answer that question and say, the future of work is a series of innovations. And so what are they going to be? And what have they already started to be? So those are going to involve new technologies, new ideas of workspace, new concepts of hierarchical structures in our organizations, thinking about what languages we are going to use for communication and what are the channels of communication that we're going to find to be particularly helpful and effective. Number two, there's going to be, and there is already, in large part because of the pandemic, an acceleration in the changes in social structures. And that has also changed what I'm going to call, for our purposes today, the social contract. How many of you have ever heard that term used before? Maybe if you've ever studied philosophy or the period of the Enlightenment, or the entrance into the modern age, you might have heard about this notion, and I'll talk about it more in just a moment. And I'm going to suggest to you that we're in a period in which our relationship with our workplace, our relationship with our workspace, our relationship with our company, that all of that has been changed by the pandemic, and that we have new expectations of the places with which we work and the people with whom we work. And so as a result of that, we're seeing different structures in organizations, different work structures, and different expectations of the workplace and our working colleagues. And then finally, number three, which for some reason is showing up here as number one, I'm sorry, is I believe that because of the pandemic, but certainly the general thrust of globalization that we have been experiencing in a really, really heated way over the last 10 to 15 years, we have new notions of what we consider to be local business and what we consider to be national or global business. When I first studied in my MBA, which was not that long ago, global simply really was another word for saying that they were multinational companies or companies that operate in more than one country. But today, global means much more than that. Today, for example, Microsoft is known in every single country on the planet. It may be the first company that has actually achieved that goal. So we're not talking anymore about global meaning, oh, well, we're doing business in Europe or we're doing business in Latin America. We're talking literally about a brand that could be known in every single country and potentially have access to every major and even non-major language in the world. And I also will submit to you that the notion of local has changed. If I start to get boring, by the way, you can just raise your hand and say, Sandra, you're getting boring, because you'll remember that, I could just become boring, and I don't really want to be. The other thing is that I think that we all had a change in our spirit and our heart about our local businesses, because if we've always taken them for granted, and then we might go to Amazon to buy something because it's easier, because we're at home, because we can do electronic payments and all the rest, we grew to understand that there is a real place for local businesses in our life. And the global businesses have seen that, and they have worked very hard to make their businesses more and more local. All right. So that's not something I'm making up. That's something that we can talk about further as you wish. As I say, you can stop me at any time, but let's go through a few of these slides and open this up for some wider discussion. One of the big highlights that I want to bring to you today is we may not realize how much there is going to be a change in what is going to be evaluated as relevant to our work and is also going to have the greatest impact on our work. And those two areas that are suggested here in this graph is number one, automation, which is going to take away probably 60% of all jobs that exist today within about 20 years. And we see it, right? I don't know about you, but if I go to the local pharmacy now, I went the other day, there was one person in this huge store. There was one person. Everything is self-checkout, and that person is stocking the shelves and also helping customers. And this is a major pharmacy brand, right? Like this is a huge company. How many of you have had experiences now where you see that there's substantial cutbacks in personnel everywhere you go? And this is becoming the business model. And that means that as you all are considering your MBA, it's essential that you be considering what skills and capabilities you need to develop that you cannot be replaced by automation. And so the two primary areas that can easily be identified for developing skill sets and education that cannot be automated out are going to be, number one, the soft skills, your ability to work with people, inspire people, understand how to find the best ways to match people with their roles. This is incredibly important, and also to develop relationships with people, even though many people may be working staggered schedules, partial schedules, hybrid schedules, or fully remote schedules. So this is incredibly important. And you want to be thinking what cannot be automated. And I'll show you this in a moment, but one of the things that cannot be automated is human creativity, not in the sense that we mean. I teach a course in creative solutions to business problems, and I can just tell you that my classroom in that is full, because everybody knows that any sort of genuine understanding that we can bring about creative and innovative thinking to any situation is something that is not going to be replaced by a machine or a robot anytime soon. All right. And we're going to talk today also about how those machines and robots can become our friends, because actually they will be our friends. Let's just talk for a moment about this concept about the social contract. The social contract has been discussed, frankly, since in writings, and since Aristotle, who discussed this quite a bit. But I wanted to bring this up into the modern age. As the French Enlightenment grew strong, there was a particular philosopher who many of you might have heard of, who's actually Swiss, although French people are always surprised to find out he's Swiss. But his name was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he wrote in the 1700s. And he wrote a book by this name, The Social Contract. And I simply take one brief quotation for you to say. I'll give you a moment to read this through on your own, and then we'll discuss it for a moment. Please go ahead and read this quotation. The essential concept here is that, I'll give it to you from Rousseau, that a long time ago, human beings lived in nature, completely in nature, and they discovered very quickly something that all of you will notice. If you look down at any part of your body, you might notice that the human being is fragile. And it was well understood by groups of people that if they lived together in groups, they were more likely to survive, and they were more likely to have a higher quality of life. And on the basis of this concept, we started to developing more and more stationary places to live, and we had social agreements, implicit and explicit, by which we live and work with other people. And one of the fundamental concepts that Rousseau brings out is this one here, which is that people make a decision that by living near other people and with other people and working with other people, that their lives are better than if they don't. And one of the things that they sacrifice in order to be able to have the protections and quality of life provided by living with groups of people is to rethink our notions of freedom and liberty and justice, which is very much discussed in Rousseau, and is certainly part of the social contract of what are the freedoms we're willing to give up, what are the ones that we're not, and what is it that we expect to gain. And also that we're willing to work in concert with other people to be able to achieve our common goals. Does that make sense to everyone? And I'm just going to add on to that every business we work at is also a society, because it's a group of people that has united for some purpose. So although many things are changing in the world, including our global challenges, which we'll come to in a moment, what isn't changing is human beings. We still want to be working with people who are reliable, people who have specific skill sets and competencies that are going to help us in our work as well. And we also are looking for people who have good basic skills in problem solving and communication. So this ability to be able to have these specific capabilities is incredibly important and is not going to change even with artificial intelligence or any of the new technologies we're going to discuss in today's session. And we still need to have discernment. That is does anybody know what that word means, to be able to discern? In a sense, that means to be able to look at something and use your critical thinking and be able to see things that maybe not everybody's going to see. Like, for example, many of you get spam in your email, and isn't it true that many of you are able to recognize a spam email before you even open it? And that's because you're accessing your critical thinking skills. What are your problem-solving skills? What can you do to increase your own creativity, your own imagination, and your own innovative capability, even in small matters or as part of collaboration with a group? And then finally, do you avoid conflict or do you seek it for the purpose of increasing creative thinking and innovative thinking on your team? Because we know that no good creativity or innovation occurs in a team without the intentional generation of some conflict and difference of opinion, because that's what inspires us to really think creatively and innovatively. And we're going to call all of this critical thinking. Here's some more data points for you. This is from the research I was mentioning a moment ago from these two professors at Imperial College in London. This is from David Lefebvre and David Schreier. And they are listed in the bibliography here, and I can also put it in the chat if you want to look at their research. But they are saying here that AI is going to transform and impact 80% of all current jobs within the next 10 years. That means everybody in this room today is going to be affected in their jobs by artificial intelligence. In addition to that, there's going to be a vast expanse of $12 trillion expanse of increase in global GDP because of the use of artificial intelligence. So we're going to see a massive growth of business opportunity and also, of course, of potential wealth and even greater distribution of wealth. So I just put this up here for you to see the great impact of just the expansion of this one technology of artificial intelligence. If we look, for example, in the United States, take a moment just to read through this slide. You don't have to read all of it, but take a moment to look it through, and then we'll discuss it. So in the study, you can see that they looked at, this is just the economy of the United States. which is where they're doing their research. And they've identified 800 different occupations and 160 million different jobs. And across those parameters, they have found that each occupation, in other words, what you are doing today for your work, requires you're using 52 abilities and 41 different activities. And these are the bullet points. That those activities, such as memorization, information ordering, have more exposure to AI and therefore are more likely to be taken in by AI as its own tasks, and therefore may actually become the work of one of your AI assistants and not you. Next bullet point, that creative abilities or strength-based abilities are much less able to be captured by AI. And that means your ability to use your imagination, your originality, your ability to express yourself, and the way in which you were able to bring all of your capabilities together uniquely in you with your experiences. All of that cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence. If you go farther below on the same slide, you're going to see, interestingly, at least I find it interesting, I hope you find it interesting, that this report was just revealed to us less than a week ago. So this is really hot off the presses. That, and it's for us to be able to be prepared for this technological change with AI, that you can see that all kinds of by rote capabilities are going to be much more exposed to AI and therefore be improved by, assisted by, or taken over by AI. You'll notice that that percentage is less for retail people with whom personal relationships and developing personal relationships is much more important. And you'll notice that's about the same for athletes and sports competitors because the physical body and the capabilities of the physical body are not going to be replaced anytime soon by any of these technologies. I simply wanted to ask you to have a quick look at this. I find this quite interesting. Notice that AI has been around for a long time, and that in the 80s and 90s, it was primarily responsible for developing facial recognition, speech recognition, and decision report systems. By about 10 years ago, we were in the period of AI 2.0 and deep learning. I'm sure you've seen that on the covers of a lot of books in airports. But right now, we're in the period of generative AI, and this is going to absolutely change the world. An example of generative AI, as you know, is ChatGPT. What we're now looking at, and this is the future, if you came here today to see the future, this is the crux of the future, is going to be the unique combinations of the capabilities of artificial intelligence with the unique capabilities that cannot be replaced by the human being. And that is going to be the person in the future who is going to have incredible job opportunities and an interesting work life. The best that we can combine, the best of the human, which includes the soft skills I mentioned before, and also the ability to be able to use artificial intelligence as an assistant, not as a replacement. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? I hope that this is not disturbing to you. I'm just, this is actually the real truth. There's 3 different reports that have come out, one from Microsoft, which I encourage you to look at on their website, called the Microsoft New Future of Work Report. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides from that. The Economist has been updating also its Future of Work report, to which you should have access. If you don't have access, you can always write to me. You can see my email address here. And of course, you have the email address of Matthias and the other people on our team. But this is where we are going, and the business programs we have at IE are recognizing the importance of building these skill sets and these capabilities, so that we are the people who will be tapped in order to be able to do the interesting work that's coming our way tomorrow, and does require substantial experience and of course, education. We are what is called in modern day language knowledge workers. And the more that we expand our knowledge in the ways that are useful and reflective of the world context, the more that we're going to have a successful career. This is just a quick point I wanted to add, and this is from the Microsoft New Future of Work report that I just mentioned. And they cite Professor Nathan Benage, and I'm mispronouncing his last name, from Air Street Capital, in which he talks about the power of AI assistance as being part of his forecast for the future. And I've marked off here in turquoise a kind of check mark in the second bullet point, which just points out how so many of our daily tasks can be replaced by, and already have been replaced by, in many, many high-tech offices, so that we don't have to think about setting our alarms, booking flights. All of these kinds of things are going to be facilitated by automation through artificial intelligence, and we will have more opportunity to use our time for tasks that cannot be replaced by technology. This is just an example of one of the impacts of this specific technology. Look at this. Before 3.0, we just went over the different areas, and before generative AI was developed, in order to generate 100 marketing copy ideas, winnow those down to just your 10 or 15 best ideas, and refine and edit for testing, would have taken a person 20 hours. Since the advent of generative AI, we can generate 100 marketing copy ideas, winnow these down to 10 to 15 of the best ones, and refine and edit for testing. In other words, accomplish the exact same tasks in 1/10 of the time. How huge is that, huh? I don't know about you guys, but I'm loving this. I don't really know how to use generative AI. I've just been sort of playing with it. And the other day I was using it for a project, and it didn't give me any of the information that I was seeking. I'm just saying that, which is much more of a reflection on me than the technology. But I'm going to tell you that in just doing it a couple of times, it gave me so many wrong answers that it inspired me to do all my work. I got my work done in record time. It just clicked into me that the answers were wrong, and so I just started to respond to what the ChatGPT had given me. And just by responding to it, I had my work done. And it didn't give me a single answer. Don't you love that? Anyway, so I have very high hopes as I get to learn to use it much better. This is an exercise that we don't need to do now, but I would like to just spend a minute of our thinking time. So one of the big areas that's going to be incredibly important for developing our competencies, our managerial capabilities and leadership capabilities, I mean, it's already upon us, is how to help people to collaborate better in teams. I mean, this is a significant value for being able to be promoted to different managerial positions and, of course, to be part of a leadership team. So just take a look at these questions for a moment, and we'll just take a lesson or two from this.
Sandra, sorry. There was a question in the chat.
Please.
There's someone called Ballon, and he says, as you say, originality and creativity is going to be irreplaceable. This is Chiara. So how does this fit with the 10 marketing copy ideas creation in 2 hours?
Yeah, great. I'm going to assume you pronounce your name Chiara. If I'm wrong, you can just correct me. But now our notion of originality and creativity is different, right? Which is why I'm teaching a course on this, and we actually are starting a new MBA on innovation. Well, actually, I don't know how new it is, Matthias. You'll have to tell me, but I'm teaching creativity in that. And the important point here, Chiara, is imagine if ChatGPT generates like I was asked to consult on a website recently and do something really different. And so we generated all of these sort of possible designs and so on using a kind of generative AI. Yes. But what we did as the team is we saw all of their ideas and so forth, and we built our own through the inspiration of what we got from the generative AI, and also taking some of those ideas, but customizing them to our context. Does that make sense? And so, Kiara, this is a kind of higher level ability, right? That it's generating the ideas, but by somebody else, like I've done creative work all my life. By somebody else generating a whole set of ideas, you now have something to edit or to react to. I'm not taking their ideas because I'm not interested really in taking their ideas, but I have a much better work product in many fewer hours by being able to look at 100 of other people's ideas. Does that make sense to you? And now I get to exercise my professional competency, my skill set, my knowledge of the company, my knowledge of the marketing context and so on, and now I'm able to produce something that is truly unique and, fast forward. Does that make sense to you? I hope that answers your question. Probably a little longer answer, Kiara, than you had wanted. But you can see also that it means that you have more time in your collaboration to already be working on potential ideas and get a sense of what are the priorities of different people. Somebody says, this is too black, this is too white, this doesn't appeal to this group, this word is not going to work, right? Now you're already doing a much greater dive into depth and nuance, and not just in, I have to come up with some ideas. Does that make sense? And so also I think, at least in my own recent experience, it's producing much better work product. This is just for your consideration to take as an example, right? That Elon Musk is arguably one of the people who is the designers of our work future and the designers of our notion of social hierarchy at work, the designer of our notion of what is a social contract at work. If we look at what he's just done at Twitter, now called X, we can see that he was trying to change exactly all those matters that we just mentioned. He wanted to change the social contract. What is the level of your dedication? Who is it that is going to be able to belong and engage in free speech on this platform? What is going to be the relationship between the customer and the company that designs the platform? What's going to be the intersection between the law and the company? And so we can look and see right now, for example, that Elon Musk used Tesla shares in order to leverage a buyout of Twitter, which meant that there was a massive decrease in the share value of the Tesla shareholders, and also meant that the users of the Twitter website considered themselves to be negatively impacted by the change in culture and the change in corporate structure of Twitter. Does all this ring for you a bit? Like that we're living this is a living case that we're watching unfold? And if you read today's paper, you will see that they are also having an impact on laws around the world, because they are being accused of doing a 5-second time delay for any links of any of their competitors that might emerge on the Twitter/X site, so that people will become impatient in waiting to click into another site and just stay on Twitter/X. Do you believe that? That's in today's paper. I read that in this morning's paper. All right. So the point here is that everything that we do in business moving into the future is also going to change the limits of what businesses can do and what governments are going to do in order to create laws that will impact the way in which people collaborate and work together, both globally and locally. And this is an essential part of the new future of work. Does this make sense to everybody? Who has access to the platform? what's going to be fair trade? Is it fair for Amazon to own so much of the retail space? Is it fair for Elon Musk to make his competitors more difficult to get to from users on his site? Those are just questions to consider. Those are ethical questions, but they are also questions that have to do with public perception of the company. And we know that perception is incredibly important. Look what happened to Uber when it was considered they treated their workers badly. Look at what Amazon is facing with regard to their history with employment. We can see also what has happened to erode the brand value of Twitter because of its treatment of its employees and also the treatment of the Twitter space itself. And so I'm going to suggest to you that all of these are matters for the new future of work and for global challenges. One of the global challenges, of course, being how is it that we are going to be able to develop a social contract by which we all live and work together in a world that has experienced, for the first time ever, mass scale disasters at a level that we have never seen before. I just wanted to ask you a simple question as we move to the last minutes of our talk today and we come to some conclusions. What has been for you one of the great innovations of the last 500 years or the last 50 years or the last 10 years? What do you think has been a great example of innovation? And feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat if you like. AI, yeah. Thank you, Kiara. That's true. Yeah, that's interesting, Kiara. Of course, we need to use artificial intelligence and generative AI to reduce costs. Mobile phones, that's great. Great example, the internet, another obvious one. The pregnancy pill, which completely changed the world. I'm going to add to that the computer itself. When the personal computer was invented, and I was one of the early users of it, people asked me what I was doing with this computer, and I said that it was the best friend to women that had ever been invented, because it was the first time that women could leave the home and work if you carried your computer with you, which would be something that would not have been available in other times. Vision-based mobility, smartphones, excellent. Well, I would just suggest to you that all innovations have been responsive to social contexts, what people needed to change, what were the challenges in the world. And now we're going to look for a moment at what are the ways. Thank you for all of those. The home office, absolutely, Kiara. Thank you, Sergey. Yes. Let's have a look at some of the global challenges and think about how this is going to intersect with the new future of work. So go ahead and take a look at some of these challenges and feel free to suggest in the chat any of these challenges that particularly interests you. Enyo, yes, antibiotics. Nayla, absolutely. The concept of reuse of space is a good example. Excellent. And things. And that's going to continue to develop. Just which of these global challenges do you think interests you, and that might be an area in which you can intersect your own work life, whether that's from doing just sort of goodwill work, or that it's a product or service that you're developing, or a policy that you're developing in your company that's going to be positive for helping to improve or mitigate any of these challenges? Yeah, energy, of course, is so critical. Sustainable development, 100% agree. Education and learning. Education and learning has been completely transformed by the pandemic. And in a positive way, that's my opinion, but all right. Clean water, huge, another one, very good. And keep going. Feel free to continue to write in the chat what any of these are. And now I'm going to challenge each of you to understand that if you want from me any magical answer about what jobs are going to be the most desired in the future, or for which it's going to be really important to have good education in order to be able to access and get that job. I can tell you right now that all of the areas of global challenges are all going to require significant work, and we'll go into which ones those are going to be in a moment, especially. And all of those areas are in a state of growth, right? So anything having to do with new technologies, being able to learn them, use them for the purposes of helping to generate creativity, originality, innovation in processes, services, customer service, especially employment changes, the social contract, being able to provide more benefits for people without increasing costs. All of those are going to be incredibly important. I'm going to choose out a few from this diagram that in my own experience, I can see that there's huge growth of jobs and really important areas of skill sets for those jobs. So sustainable development, climate change. Global ethics are going to necessarily be part of that. And so having ethical notions and learning some areas of ethics are absolutely essential because they also intersect with what is permissible, what's not permissible, what is the law, and what are differences in different geographical, social, cultural contexts. Clean water is going to be unstoppable. The need for clean water and for plant-based foods is inescapable. And those are huge areas of business growth. Anything in the medical area, you can't even believe what is coming in medicine. In your lifetime, in the next 10 years, there's going to be massive changes in the ways in which we deliver medicine, and especially the concept, the basic medical scientific concepts of medicine. I'll give you an example. There's a new technology coming in called CRISPR. It's already here. It's in very, very advanced stages of experimentation. It can help us to cure all kinds of diseases, including it can cure diabetes and it can cure various forms of cancer already. There's huge investments in this area of medical technology. You could well end up managing or leading a company that intersects with these advances in medical technology. They will affect everyone. Your generation is the first generation in world history that has a real chance at a significant portion of your generation to living healthfully to the age of 100. You are the first generation who is likely to achieve this, and it's because of changes in medical technology and dissemination. The status of women is, I don't know if I need to go into this, but you can see that there's huge pushback against all forms of diversity. There's an article exactly on this in this week's MIT Sloan Management magazine, online magazine, has an article on the pushback against diversity that will include pushback. As we are seeing in the United States and all over the world, pushback also in inclusion of minorities or women who are not a minority but are included in that group with regard to their opportunities. I just mentioned these as a few. You can see that all of these are relevant, but you don't need to have a magic genie come to you to tell you where the jobs are going to be in the future. And so everything that you do is going to be related in some way to these forecasts that come now that I'm going to share with you. These are just a few slides from the Microsoft report. Again, it's posted on their website. And there's going to be more and more experimentation in work models. And there's going to be more, and there's where the social contract is so important that we're experimenting with the social contract at work. And there's going to be more and more experimentation, period, in most companies because they know that experimentation leads to creative thinking, leads to innovative changes, cost cutting, and we're going to see an increase in cultures in companies that promote experimentation for continuous improvement of their companies in all areas. We're also going to see that forecasting is incredibly important because forecasting enables us to prepare for the future in a cost-effective way and also in a talent-effective way. And so the more that we are knowledgeable about the technologies and contexts that we're discussing today, the more we're going to help to shape the future rather than just say, oh my God, the future arrived, I have to adapt to it. You want to ideally be in a position to adapt to it, but also be in a position to make the changes that you want to make in it. The metaverse, which is going to exist in a fuller and fuller form, may not take the form that Mark Zuckerberg is advertising to us at Meta, and will probably become increasingly an opportunity for communication at work and also training programs at work. This is from Ethan Bernstein at our Harvard Business School and is very relevant to you, which is that elite talent, which is you, who also have the capabilities of these soft skills and intelligent uses of technologies such as generative AI, you will be always in demand for the rest of your life. And I just put a check mark here talking about, this is a bit about how to remain competitive. And you can see that increasingly models of coaching and mentorship are going to rise for managers and leaders who have these skills and talents, because they will be promoted and those skills and capabilities will be important. Finally, the access to the imagination. All of us need to think and reimagine what would be a workplace that is diverse. We care about diversity because diverse work environments are much more productive. They actually are happier, and they're more creative because you have more different points of view. And so what can we do to help to create more inclusive, accessible, sustainable work environments? Well, this is something that all of us are imagining today, and you will all be part of that imaginative work at your current place of work and at future places of work. So there's two final points I wanted to make here. One is that this new future of work inspires leadership in the global challenges. And those leadership forms can be to innovate processes. It could be to create new products or services. It could be to develop different kinds of impact. They could be to innovate the notion of leadership itself. And I put up here just a few pictures to show you examples of companies that have or have not been able to innovate in clear ways. Univision has been able to innovate through a variety of multiple cultures and entertainment needs. Amazon was able to grow into the pandemic, but we have to ask ourselves the question, where does Amazon go from here? Is it in a stationary position? What about Meta if their metaverse does not succeed? And if Facebook continues to decline in popularity, and there's other forms of social platforms that replace it, what will happen to Meta? Alibaba is an example of a company that has been able to mutate over and over again and has become so many companies that even their founder disappeared because he had become such an incredibly powerful person. And of course, that's Jack Ma. Xerox famously was not able to innovate and change its technology. It liked its technology. It had been groundbreaking at one time. They didn't develop new technologies, and they were unable to survive in the form that they existed. Xerox, by the way, could have been Microsoft. Xerox, at the time that Microsoft really took off, Xerox was a much better technological company. Finally, these are just a few conclusions as I want to ask you for your conclusions about some of the high points of three of the studies that have been done on the new future of work and their intersection with global challenges in The Economist, McKinsey's website, and Microsoft's report that I've mentioned a moment ago. We're looking at experiments in workplace. We're looking at continuous changes in the technologies and our adaptation of them. Our very notion of productivity is changing. The way in which we will be evaluated in our work is changing and will include notions of, for example, well-being. And productivity will be measured differently from the way it is now. We will be measuring collaboration. We will be measuring creativity. We will be measuring well-being. We will be measuring our ability to work with others across multicultural landscapes. We're going to be thinking about how we actually manage global teams in which nobody ever meets each other, but they have significant responsibility and significant budgets. We're going to be thinking about how we can increasingly manage and lead diverse teams and groups. And we're going to be looking at what we can do to be able to increase team creativity with technologies and also without them, and how we can work with each other. So I just leave these with you. I'd like to hear from you what you have as either questions, comments, thoughts, disagreements about what you think about what are the ways in which we're going to be able to meet our global challenges as businesses grow in the areas that are relevant to global challenges, and what are the skills, capabilities, and competencies that we're going to be able to need, that we're going to need in order to be able to be successful. So I hope this has given you some good thinking. Please feel free to ask your questions. And I hope that this has been thought-provoking and useful to you. Thank you all so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Let's see if there's any questions or comments. Feel free to use the microphone or the chat, and don't be shy. There's no wrong questions here.
Feel free to write in the chat if that's easier for you. Well, you can see that you are the generation, by the way, this is a critical period. 2020 to 2050 is going to be considered in the future to have been the pivotal period in which the world significantly changed. And you're all going to be studying, competing, and working in this period of change. And you will be leaders of it. In one way or another, you will be leaders of it. So I welcome you here to the platform of thinking business leaders who are educated and able to make the changes that we need to make so that we can increase the quality of our companies and the quality of our work and the quality of our lives.
Sandra, I think we have a question from Carlos. I think he was able to write it down. So he's saying, what's your thoughts about traditional education courses in industries?
Yeah, so I think that this is a fantastic question and very timely. Continuous education is part of everybody's future. It's no longer going to be just optional because things are changing so quickly. And so, to your point, we now have much more adaptable modes of education. And so some of this is going to be, some of these we do at IE, right? So I do asynchronous forms. We can do synchronous forms. I've done 24-hour form, which is actually super interesting to do a 24-hour class that people can come and go as they want over 24 hours. How you're going to assess people, if you're going to have online assessments that are open for a certain period of time. Are you going to have, a professor or a trainer come in and be in person for some period of time, and the rest of it will be on a self-schedule, for example? Are you going to, at IE, for example, I'm participating in a program where we're working with live companies and live projects while we're also teaching the students these topics. And so I think we have an opportunity for continuous integration also of the workplace with education that's relevant to the workplace. So I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation in this area, and people are going to need a lot of flexibility because we're all traveling and we're all in different time zones, and we also have different personal lives. I hope that's helpful to you, Carlos. Feel free to follow up in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and call on John. You have your hand up. Do you have a question or a thought you'd like to share?
I know, just a question. Thank you. I'm just thinking about, as we saw a lot of during the pandemic as well, why people transitioning to home offices and the companies were afraid of the productivity go down. And in terms of research in the area versus home office versus being in the office in terms of productivity, we still see some of the companies are reluctant to keep the same, policies that we had and are moving back to an office policy. What you see in the area, and why do you think some of the larger organizations are moving back to an office policy?
Well, I can answer that question very simply, John. And of course, it's an extremely timely question, right? There's a couple of concerns here for companies. One is that the research shows that people who engage in informal conversation during the workday, like when you're working in person and you just run into somebody in the building, that in companies where there's an encouragement of informal conversations in person, there's an increase of up to 35% in productivity. So we find that informal conversations are incredibly helpful for bonding people. Research now is how to create those same kinds of human bonds and human discussions while people are working remotely. And there's been a lot of suggestions in that way. But that's one of the things that needs to be worked out, is how we can create that social connection that also leads to inspiration and productivity. Another consideration is the real estate costs. Well, companies are having to pay all of these, since, you learn in the MBA that what are fixed costs. So these are all fixed costs for a company, and they have to pay them every day. And if they're not able to attribute any specific monetary value to having people in the building, then of course they're going to start letting go of these buildings. For many companies, they do not want to do this for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the importance of seeing people, and seeing people also helps to get people promoted, because it's kind of like, it's the line from the film with Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster about the silencing of the lambs, right? What do you covet? In other words, what do you want? You want what you see. And so there is sort of that way in which we need to be able to work that out. And companies are very worried about being stuck with big real estate bills and having nothing to show for them. And it's my belief that as we see more and more people moving into cities, which will happen at the same time that we increase GDP and the use of generative AI, the more people are living in cities, the more that we're going to see a change in the use of urban real estate, because companies may need less and less office space. So there may be more pivotal space or adaptive space, which was sort of the idea of WeWork. But of course, the way that company was run drove them to the ground. As we now know, they announced last week that they're likely to file for bankruptcy if they haven't already done so. So there's a lot of issues there: human relations, getting people to see each other, dealing with real estate costs, and also ultimately urban environment and urban development. All of those are just some of the issues around the ways in which we're going to be having to think through how we make the change from cities that are totally revenue based on office space to cities that are not as based in office space. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But it's a great question, and all of us want to work more from home and less from the office.
At least a flexible model, right?
We need to be flexible, but I'm dealing with this in my own family. Like, my own daughter is looking for a job that's fully remote, and I'm telling her, don't do that, because people won't know you and they won't see you and you won't get promoted. And she's telling me that I'm just wrong, but I'm telling you what the research shows. Anyway, I'm here to be helpful. I hope I'm giving you good information. Of course, that can change. Thank you for your question, John. Thank you. And thank you, Carlos, also for yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sandra. I think we're running out of time. And of course, there's a good discussion. So As Sandra's providing there, she has all the contact information. So if you want to reach out to her, I mean, she's more than welcome to help you guys. And again, hopefully the session was very interactive. Sandra, again, thank you for your time. And of course, depending where you are, hopefully you enjoy the rest of the days in terms of your summer or winter. And hopefully to see you soon here in Madrid. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.